Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we are taking a look at the Latin Alliance Order of Battle for their beta ORBAT, which was released on the 1st of August 2023. Seeing as these are beta ORBATs, I'm not going to do a complete deep dive on them. The idea of these videos is more to look into what the different changes are and how it could affect you and your force composition. As always, if you're interested in keeping up to date with all things Dystopian Wars, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for any future updates. I've made guides through most of these faction changes already, so if you're interested in those, make sure you check out the rest of the channel. One of the specific rules that were changed for the Alliance are the Legionnaire Assault Pods. They now still allow you to assault from 6 inch away rather than the usual 4, but they are now providing the sustained bonus and hazard quality when making an assault. This is quite important because the French now have very easy access to the elite crew rule, more on which later when we're discussing the patrons. Another change that was made is the Malinois Strike Fighters. They are now classed as SRS tokens as well. They were before, it's just that the wording has been changed. And oddly enough, almost no changes to the Frelon Bombers, because, well, they were a bit ahead of the curve in being a special SRS token anyway, so don't expect to see many changes there, whereas it has changed for most other nations and factions. Other than that, there's a very cool thing you can do with the naval ballista, the Rostratum. It has been cleaned up in the most recent beta version, mind you, but it still very much works the same. As soon as you're able to inflict a point of damage onto something using this weapon, you can have a Valor effect that makes the initial target receive a level of disorder, and you can then turn it to any facing of the attacker's choosing. This is also not mass dependent yet, although that might hopefully become the case, because that means that you can turn flagships around, putting them out of the game for potentially 1 or 2 turns as well, which sounds incredibly strong to me, but hey, that's why it's a beta version for now, isn't it? As far as Battlefleet compositions go, there's a few changes. There isn't really one for the Alliance faction Battlefleet, but there is one for the French frontline Battlefleet. It can now so have multiple Loire class ships in it if you so desire. That is because there is a new named variant of the Loire coming up, a very good one, and we'll discuss that when we get to that part. The major rework is in the French Levant Battlefleet. It used to have strategic reserves, but it now has Sabre Rattle instead. There was always a bit of an annoyance with the strategic reserve part of the French Levant Battlefleet, because if you have a carrier, you're not allowed to actually launch any SRS on the turn that you come into strategic reserve, or any reserve really. And that was annoying because that meant that you couldn't launch any SRS on your first turn, and there's quite a few of them, of those skimming carrier ships in that one. So it's been changed to Sabre Rattle. Sabre Rattle allows you to sort of redeploy as long as you end up closer to the enemy than you were before, which means that if you just start with Levant carriers, you just deploy them all the way at the back line, and then you're allowed to bring them to any point really in your deployment zone that you want. In addition, quite a lot of the Levant ships have seen significant increases in their speed to compensate, so it's the strategic reserves is no longer as big a crutch for this battle fleet as it used to be. Savvy opponents, however, will be able to shoot down those ships rather quickly if the French player is not careful. Especially things like railguns for Commonwealth they're extremely dangerous against these types of ships. So if you're a French player, make sure that you keep those. You make a note of where they are and counter deploy as much as you possibly can. Apart from that, there is a small tweak in the Italian support battle fleet. You can now include multiple Sagitta class submarines, because, well, that's the only submarine they have, and otherwise including 2 of them was a bit of a moot point, so that is now fixed as well. And as a neat little bonus, the Susa battle fleet now has command override as well, on top of being able to take any other thing with the conscripted crew rule into their force if they so desire. As far as patrons go, they are fairly basic. The first one is Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the president, clocking in at 2 victory points, but all the French units in the force gain the disciplined and elite crew rules, which is no small thing. And we'll also see that there's quite a few new French units added, so doing an all-French force is probably more viable than it has ever been before. Rafe Cortez, the Grand Admiral of the People, is mostly for the Sousa. All Sousa units in the force lose the conscripted crew rule, so, well, they are a bit cheaper compared to their Union counterparts because of the conscripted crew rule, but you can get rid of that one for just 1 VP, making the Sousa possibly quite a bit of a powerhouse. If you like fielding them, they've gotten way better with this patron. This is the point where I normally go and check out the weapons, but just to illustrate this point, this is the Columbia Heavy Battleship. In an Alliance force it only clocks in at 260 points. It hasn't really changed, that was a bit of a mistake there. Yeah, if you can lose the conscripted rule, you're essentially getting it at 18 points cheaper than the Union is. Although, to be fair, the Union still has the bonus of the Give 'em Hell rule, allowing you to gain devastating on all the different gunnery and fusillade weapons. But yeah, that's still quite cheap compared to what the Union pays for it. So, strong little patron, if you ask me. And when we do check out the weapons, we'll notice that there's not really many changes that affect the Alliance. They get pretty much all of the different weapons that most other factions get, except for maybe the rolling broadsides, those are news. But the big one that was tweaked was the Rostratum Naval Ballista. It got an extra point in support as well, clocking in at 12.7, but it has no point blank profile, so you definitely want to shoot at a long distance. And shooting at long distance is even easier because they now come with the extreme range, so quite a little bit of a buffed weapon, and yeah, especially with that Valor effect, I think these are some of the most amazing ships out there. That you can currently get as long-range artillery, because it really screws over the opponent's battle line as well. And now, back to the Columbia. Not a lot needs to be said, except for the fact that it now has a few more weapon options coming in as well, which is great to see. And there's been a small little buff, giving it full steam ahead, as well, making it even faster to get into the opposing line. Mind you, even faster is a bit of tongue-in-cheek, because it is one of the more slower moving battleships, but if you're allowed to double your drift to 6-inch, a 10-inch movement is quite substantial, so expect it to get into that brawler range of sub 10-inch, where it really starts shining with all of those nice broadside weaponry as well. At the start of the video, I mentioned that a full French force is now more viable than ever, and that's because this thing is now added. It's a completely new entry called the Couronne Grand Carrier, which is a carrier ship of mass 4, clocking in at 320 points, and it seems to be one that comes with Fortunes of War, a very useful ability allowing you to cancel Valor effects from the opposing forts. On top of that, it seems to come with quite a neat little stack of weapons, lots of rocket batteries as well, although the different fire arcs don't always line up neatly. It's not like it really needs to, however, because it's got a nice little SRS capacity of 10.6 with the quite strong little Malinois strike fighters. That means that it packs quite a bit of a punch for not that many points. However, not that many points is to be taken with a grain of salt, because apparently you can upgrade it to have La Dame Liberté on top of it. It costs you 25 points, and the unit may have a citadel-mounted statue of the Goddess Liberty. If upgraded in this manner, the unit gains a Solix generator, which is already a pretty nifty little thing, and gains the inspirational rule as well. Now, it doesn't mention any weapons options yet, as this model is not yet released, but if it becomes a solar generator one, I do hope that some options will be added to change out all of those different rocket batteries for perhaps in some of the Heatland sets as well. The torpedo turrets, technically small turret options as well, so maybe this version can become a sort of weird hybrid of a carrier ship that also has a frick ton of small lancet weapons on it, making it a very scary little ship in short range as well. But we'll see, these things tend to get upgraded and updated as new releases come out. The Magenta Levant battlecruiser has not changed in points, and in fact, like quite a few of these Levant ships, has seen a bit of an increase in both the speed, increased by +1, both crippled and battle ready value, and has seen its armor just being an extra +1, it no longer degrades in its crippled value. Also new is the full steam ahead rule, meaning this thing can really shoot up the board because it can now double its drift, giving you 6 inch, and then it can increase its speed to 10 using the Levant Surge ability, giving it a quite significant 16 inch speed straight ahead. And you mustn't forget, with Saber Rattle, that means that you can point it at pretty much anything from your opponent that you'd like to see destroyed very early on. So getting into closing range with this ship should be very possible, and if your opponent ventures out of its deployment zone, his deployment zone by more than 8 inches, you can even get into point blank range rather quickly as well. So it's definitely something that has a bit of board control added to it. You just really want to keep it safe, because with only 6 hull points, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of this one going fully crippled. If you hit that Citadel value of 26, which is something that quite a few flagships and cruiser units can do, so make sure to deploy it also slightly conservatively so it doesn't just get shot out of the skies really quickly. No real changes to the Mars heavy battleship. It's as good as it's ever been. In fact, advanced repair facilities counteracts a lot of the more experimental design rules, although there are none, as far as I could tell, in this Alliance ORBAT, so yeah, that's a thing. The Minerva assault carrier has also been released. It was a bit of a chunker, so it has now gotten a Mass 4 upgrade, although that comes at the expense of less turn limit. It is a catamaran design after all, and there's a few changes as well to the hull point distribution that come along with it. Alongside of that, its points cost has been bumped up by 15 points to 270, but given how you get a very good carrier and an advanced repair facilities ship along with that, along with 14 HP, which is quite respectable for ships of this class, I say that points increase is slightly deserved as well. The Oriflamme Grand Battlecruiser still clocks in at 230 points, and its name variants haven't really changed. There's a bit of cleanup with the Fesch, who now has a heavy gun battery that is correctly aimed towards the back and no longer double front, and the Richelieu is pretty much the same as it was before. If you want to have a gunboat with a focused gunnery that just has all of the heat lance weapons on there, this is the ship for you. Now, what has seen some significant changes are the rest of the carriers. The Couronne is being added as being the go-to, perhaps, Fortunes of War option for the French. So the Saint-Michel Levant battle carrier has gotten some quite interesting changes. First of all, it has dropped by 28 points, and the weapons have now been slightly downgraded to go alongside of that to just gun batteries instead of the full heat lancet upgrade path. However, its speed has been increased with +1, same as we saw with Magenta, and the armor is now also no longer degrading as it goes into a crippled state, same as with the Magenta. The one thing that it also gets, same as with the Magenta, is the full steam ahead rule, meaning that this ship can actually go up quite fast should you want to, and the neat thing is that it no longer has Fortunes of War, but command codes instead, allowing you to do rerolls. And I think that's going to make the Saint-Michel a really important ship in the French roster, because there's nothing quite as painful as going up to point blank range with all of those fancy heat lancet weapons that you pay a lot of points for and then completely whiffing your attack. The Saint-Michel Levant battle carrier now is a ship that can go into that central line and spread command code love to all of the ships around it. And in addition to it, it now has new options as well, listed here at the bottom, for different generators. So should you want to, you can change that heat lance that is slightly awkwardly aimed towards the back for something like a shroud generator to drastically increase the survivability of the ship as well, giving you a quite a nice little escort ship to go along with all of the smaller Levant ships should you so desire. Having said that, if you liked the old Saint-Michel, or you haven't got the Couronne and you still want to have Fortunes of War in your fleet, Le Phoenix is a new entry, and it pretty much is what the old Saint-Michel was. One small change compared to the old Saint-Michel: this one has already gotten its heat lance at the back swapped out for a shield generator as the named variant, so perhaps slightly more expensive towards compared to what the old Saint-Michel was, but it very much is still an option there for Fortunes of War if you do not have the Couronne yet, and yeah, we're all very much waiting on that little statue. The Vauban Sky Fortress hasn't seen any changes yet, so not much point in talking about that one. The Virginia class assault ship has seen a few changes, mostly a mistake here with the F being replaced by an aft weapon for its rear rocket battery. It has the points cost listed in blue, but that's not the point, it's the same as it was before. But you now have some options as well for those rocket batteries, allowing you to get a very, very good gunboat out of it as well, that still allows you to assault. And you mustn't forget that Terminator Assault, I'm not entirely sure how Terminator Assault and Conscripted Crew interact, because technically it's not the ship doing the assault, but the tokens are. But its biggest downside of Conscripted Crew is automatically overwritten by the Terminator Assault. Now, if it turns out that Conscripted Crew also affects your Terminator Assaults, remember there's a patron that can scratch that away should you so desire. So overall, I think the Virginia class assault battleship is in a better position than it ever was before. Now, onto the meat and potato, the Auxilla Fast Cruiser. It has gotten a bit of a nerf because there's a points increase of plus 4 points per model for no real changes to the actual model itself. It was quite efficient because with both a regular gun battery and a heavy gun battery aiming at the front, and then an option to turn it into a mine carrier as well should you so desire, it was perhaps a bit too much of an efficient points model in the roster, so a slight tap on the wrist for that one. The Cestus Sebek hasn't really seen any options. It's a great thing if you want to introduce some cheap flak barrage into your force, so it still very much has a role. It didn't really need to change. The Charlemagne Heavy Cruiser was a go-to in any French list, really, and because of that it's gotten a bit of a nerf. Its points have been updated with plus 5 points, and you mustn't forget the heavy firepower was tweaked quite a bit to specifically nerf units that have this rule. The Charlemagne was one of the worst offenders of this in the previous version of the ORBAT, so yeah, it's sort of normal that this gets reined in a bit. All in all though, would I still take Charlemagne heavy cruisers? Yes. Yes, I would. Very much so. So don't feel too bad about the slight points adjustment. It's still a very good option. The Chevalier cruiser is still quite strong as well, but now there's a bit more of a points difference with the Charlemagne, so the Charlemagne is no longer the automatic choice, and the Chevalier is therefore slightly more of an interesting choice by default. As far as the Écuyère frigates go, they've been bumped up by 8 points, or 2 points per model, because they are really, really good. It's not really a change that they are attached unit French, that's what it was before, it's just listed in blue. Yeah, a bit of a tap on the finger, but nothing that makes you not want to take this unit. The platforms haven't really changed all that much, except for this one getting Advanced Repair Facility 2, meaning that it's even better if you want to have a platform that you can sail to do some repairs, you now can. The Gettysburg Heavy Monitor has seen quite a significant buff. First off, its points have gone up by 1 point, that's a thing, but it has now been upgraded to have heavy broadsides, which means that you can even start using broadsides at medium range, or closing range I should say, which stacks really nicely with the heavy gun battery. So if you want to have a central brawler, you now have one. Also a slight increase in fray, though if you want one you get the one with the Terminator Assault, should you so desire. And same as its larger counterpart, the Columbia battleship, these now also come with full steam ahead, making them move up to 10 inches, getting in range with those nice heavy broadsides even faster, which is really, really good. On top of that, it has reliable design, making it even simpler to repair them, so you really do want that sort of slower perhaps, but going in a straight line brawler ship in the Susa. And Shallow Draft is now just a straight up buff, because it, coming within 1 inch of terrain gives you a disorder. These boys don't really have to care about that, so they can choose their line to advance on more easily now. Next up we have a whole bunch of ships that were quite fine as they were, such as the Gladius Strike Cruiser, Jupiter Support Carrier, and the Loire Light Cruiser. Now you might think like, oh, the Loire, that was an option that not a lot of people were taking. Well, I'm pretty sure you're going to be wanting to model them, because there is now a new named variant called Les Ratons Laveurs. This is a new entry, a named variant of the Loire class, also possibly the reason why you can now have multiple Loire classes in those things. They clock in at 300 points, which is 10 points per model more for traditional Loires, but for that you get Devil's Own Luck, which is great, Focused Gunnery, which is great. It's a really good upgrade for 10 points. I mean, it's not like it makes it a no-brainer option, I think, within the French ORBAT, because yeah, there's a bit of strong competition there for something in the center line, but it's at least a more interesting option for the Loire itself. The only downside is that they no longer get Vanguard, but they get Shadow Hunter instead, and that means that you can do a bit of counter-deploying as well with that unit. I'm not too excited about that though, because yeah, counter-deployment is something with that they the whole alliance as a whole gets a lot of, thanks to Saber Rattle. All in all though, an option well worth considering for your force. There's no changes to the Pereira War platform. There's not that many changes really to any of the platforms in all of the ORBATs. And the Picardy Littoral Monitor also sees no real changes, along with the Pilum Monitor. The one that was changed quite a bit is the Puggio Destroyer. The good news is that there's now more options for those small turrets if you want to swap them out. Mind you, they do become ridiculously expensive if you're not careful to do so, and you can now only have 2 additional models, and they lost the auxiliary mine layer on top of that compared to the previous ORBAT. So all in all, I say that the Puggio Destroyers are hit a bit in this ORBAT update. Something that was definitely buffed is the Providence Merchantman, which saw a -7 points reduction and gained both reliable design and shallow draft, so buffs all round for this slightly undertaken option within the ORBAT. What has gotten a bit of a nerve though is the Saratoga Littoral Cruiser. This was the one that has the Terminator Assault option. It has gained shallow draft, that is a thing that all of them gained. Their natural fray ability has been nerfed a bit, but don't really care, because they never use that anyway with Terminator Assault, and their hull points have gone down a bit. On top of that, they gain a quite substantial 10 points point cost. This was one of those ships that was just a bit too effective as things were before, and you mustn't forget that things like assault tokens are nerfed in general, so this is no longer the go-to option to build with those War veterans. You can now actually start considering the other ships as well. One unit that has seen quite a few changes is the Scorpio Artillery Cruiser. First of all, it has gone up by 2 points per model, so that is a slight nerf, you can get over that one. It has lost heavy firepower, however, so that was a thing where you used to be able to just shoot with every one of those ballistas at full force. However, the ballista profile has been updated a bit with extra support, so it's not like it counteracts that completely, but it has gained a very strong Valor ability to offset all of this, making this option more sort of reliable and more appealing than ever before. And you mustn't forget they now baseline gain extreme range on their weapons, meaning Spotter actually works with them as well. And with 4 Valor you can actually just go ham with those little Valor effects. If you really are worried about your opponent blocking it, if you're rolling 12 dice, it's not hard to inflict a point of damage on really anything in the game, and as things stand now, every single shot that you take with a unit of these has the potential to turn around a ship. Just as a joke, you could do it by spinning it around 360 degrees every single time, or rather 180 and still turn things around, which is funny in its own right, but yeah, very, very strong option and a lot of tactical options if you take this ship. Next up we have a bunch of entries that have not changed. The Spada attack cruiser, which is the heaviest cruiser for the Italians, has not seen any changes. Neither have their Springfield corvettes for the Susa. They're still as good as they ever were with their corvette duties. The Sumter heavy landing ship, the Sumter landing ship has gotten a very small little buff with the shallow draft rule that was added to all of these paddle wheel designs, but that's about it. The Vasco battle platform, again with most platforms, hasn't really seen any changes, and the Vulcan repair ship hasn't seen any changes either. That was it for all the surface designs. Now we have the skimming units, and the ones that are not released yet haven't really seen any changes. They are still pretty much as they were. For example, this Alma Levant support cruiser has absolutely no blue text whatsoever. The one that has been released is the Chasseur Levant Strike cruiser. That one has now seen an increase in its speed with +1 and no longer has any degrading armor, so increase slightly in its toughness, and it has gained the full steam ahead rule to offset that change to the tactical reserves, so that is no longer a bit of a crutch for these units. What is odd, however, though, is still its weapon selection. It comes baseline with a heavy rocket battery, and you'd have to be soft in the head not to swap that out with a heavy gun battery. Unfortunately, that costs you +5 points, so this model does not cost 127 points, it costs 132 if you want to actually have a ship that functions. The Dieppe Levant Solex cruiser hasn't really changed yet. It's one of the more interesting ships that you can get, but we'll have to await its release. The Furieux Levant Grand Corvette has not really seen any changes except for the buffs in speed like we saw before, which is quite good because right now with its many changes, it doesn't have elite crew just yet, but it does have the Legionnaire assault pods, and this is one of the more interesting versions to add elite crew onto, thanks to Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, making it a very, very effective assault unit. And seeing how it's still the landing vessel for the Alliance, I don't think you can go wrong if you're a new player if you build a few Furieux Levant Grand Corvettes, because I imagine when those types of missions come out, they'll be more handy than ever before. No real changes to the Gascony Levant Merchantmen, neither to the Honneur Levant Destroyers. Well, again, we'll see what happens when they have to be deployed onto the tabletop itself without having to be able to have the option to keep them in reserve. There is a small little change to the Marseille Levant bomber carrier, bringing it up to 6 points, which is not really something we've seen for the Gascony, for instance, so sort of weird, and that is the only one where that change has gone through. But again, it's a beta version, so that can still change. The Volière has seen its speed upgrade pretty much as before, but its hull points do not get any better now in its crippled state, which is weird because the bomber version does get it and these guys don't. They also have the full steam ahead option, but yeah, I don't rate that as being amazing because that's not really something that you want to do. Mind you, Volière Levant strike carriers are no slouches in medium range with 2 regular gun batteries. That little bit of extra firepower you can get out of them is perhaps an option to use it in midway battle. When it comes to the submerged units, there are a few changes though. The Epaular Artillery Submarine can now include up to 4 additional models, which is 2 more than it used to, and on top of that it gets Shadow Hunter as well, allowing you to counter deploy towards with your enemy. Not the most amazing thing on submerged units because well, those deploy last anyway, so usually your opponent's force is deployed in its entirety. Would I take Epaular artillery submarines in my force though? More reason to do so than ever before, because they are very much worth taking as an anti-submarauder trick. They do come with a navigation lock, and there's quite a few abilities now that get blocked if a unit has the navigation lock critical marker, so definitely consider this unit. The Sagita Hunter submarine has seen the small change that all Hunter submarines really have gotten, in the fact that they can only take 3 now anymore if you take them. So you can have a maximum of 5 to sort of reduce that big slot of opening torpedo salvo. The Sirene attack submarine, however, has changed significantly. That one was just a sitting duck with its heat lancet. You can now have up to 4 of them, which is already an increase with 2, so that's a good start. But they now gain forward deployment, and together with heat lancets, that means you're in a very optimal position to start harassing the enemy very early on. And if things get very hairy as well, or your opponent, or you have deleted whatever it is you wanted on a flank, you can still do a strategic withdrawal to reposition throughout the game as well. But that's a dangerous thing to do because there's no guaranteed way that it will arrive from its reserve. So use that one, at your own risk. The last entry is the flyer, the Cordoba Aero Galleon, which is the Spanish. The artwork for it is amazing, but there's no real changes to the rules. That one also still has to come out, but it's just a little glimpse into the far future for the Alliance. And there we have it, all of the different changes to the Alliance. This is a faction that in its core identity has changed quite a bit, because it is no longer using that strategic reserves as much as a crutch, but as a compensation. They do have some of the fastest vessels now in the whole setup. So yeah, we'll see how that turns out for them. It's still very glass cannony as a force, which is precisely as it needs to be. And now that strategic reserves is also nerfed, this might actually be a good change for the faction overall. If you play with the Alliance, make sure you hit the comment section to see if you agree with me. If you've played with them, let me know how it goes, how all of your Levant ships being on the table has affected you. And yeah, I do hope to see you in the next video when I do the next ORBAT changes one. If you have a particular preference, make sure you also mention it in the comments, because, well, I did this one because somebody mentioned it last time that they were really looking forward to this one, so if you're in the same boat, make sure you let me know, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!